So you want to cook more, but you keep running into these little issues. Hello my dear friends, I'm Raisa, nutritionist and founder of Nutrinut. If this is your first time here, I'm welcoming you to the community with arms wide open. And if this is not your first time, thank you so much for being part of this Nutrinut family. It really means the world to me. I'm sharing with you here some of my personal tips, some of things that used to overwhelm me and that used to make me not want to go into the kitchen as much, and what I learned from it, how I started to tweak the recipes that I pick, what I started to do about those things to make my time in the kitchen as enjoyable as it possibly can be. Cooking for hours and then not liking the final product. This is also something that has happened to me quite often until I learned this one little trick. And that is to make sure that you are trying what you're making and seasoning as you go. Don't leave the seasoning part of it just in the end of the process, because you can miss key moments in your recipes to boost the flavor. And remember, seasoning your food is not only about adding salt and pepper. In fact, that's such a minimal factor that contributes to the flavor of your final dish. You can use spices and you can play with the acidity of your dishes, even with the sweetness. Even if it's not a sweet dish, sometimes adding a little sugar or maple syrup or honey will just make such a difference in the flavor. When it comes to acidity, a little lime or lemon typically boosts the flavor like nothing else does. And when it comes to herbs and spices, of course you can use what you have in your pantry, like the dried herbs, but I can't say enough how the real thing really just makes such an amazing difference. If you haven't cooked with real garlic and onions, that is where you start, baby, right there. Every single dish, that's what sets, the tone for me when I'm cooking. And I just recently started exploring with fresh herbs that we keep in the garden. So things like basil, mint, rosemary, even oregano. Feeling uninspired. Sometimes you arrive in the kitchen and you really, don't know where to begin. You don't know what to cook with that. Using the sweet potato example again, you don't know what to do with that potato or that chickpea or that leek or, whatever you have in your fridge. So I turned to a few different places for inspiration. I think one of the main places that most of us think of going to when we want to look at a recipe and a little inspiration is Pinterest. I love Pinterest. I have so many boards there of, desserts, of like snack ideas, like anything that you can imagine, you can find on Pinterest. And I just love, that's a social media platform that I really enjoy using and just spending some time in there. And even if you don't end up making that exact recipe, I think that the fun thing about looking at recipes is that you see how other people do things and the different combinations that they've tried. So next time that you're testing something with, let's say, a potato or with a leek, and you remember, oh, this person used a, smoked paprika in their fries and their potatoes. I'm gonna give that a go because it sounds really interesting. So when you turn to places for inspiration, doesn't mean that you have to replicate and then you have to do that exact same recipe or even buy all those ingredients. Honestly, sometimes following recipes can end up coming out kind of expensive. Another place that I like spending my time on is actually YouTube. And no surprise there, I look at a lot of recipe videos to learn different, techniques, different ways of doing things, because people are so creative. And that's how you learn, by seeing what other people have tried, trying out yourself, and even making and creating your own dishes and combinations. And if you're up for a little Netflix, there are a bunch of cooking shows over there. And in fact, let me tell you something. One of the reasons why I started turning to the kitchen myself was from watching Jamie Oliver on TV. Now, this was back in Brazil. This was quite a few years ago. I think he was just getting started, or he was very young. I was very young. when I was watching his show, and it was just so, I was fascinated by it. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not that I would make all of his recipes. I honestly just like turning on the TV in the mornings and just watching him cook and seeing how he did things. And one of the things that I really appreciate about his recipes is that they were always so simple. It was really like using a potato and turning it into magic with just seasonings and the way to prepare it. I don't know how to describe it. If you haven't seen, his show, I do encourage you to check it out. When he first started and those, older episodes, I really, really enjoyed watching, and I can very easily say that he definitely is one of my main sources for inspiration. And this ties in nicely with the next place that you can look for recipe inspiration, and that is in cookbooks. The first cookbook that I ever bought with my money was Jamie Oliver's Italy book. So unfortunately, that book got lost with a lot of my things from my childhood, but I do still purchase his books, and this is my latest one. So I really love Jamie Oliver. I do use this book as a guide, as I'm the type of person that you can kind of classify as a rebel of sorts, because I will very rarely stick to a recipe. I kind of tend to just read a recipe, okay, kind of got it, close the book, and then I'll go and do my own thing and see what happens. And if you're not into cooking shows or into recipe books or any of that, I think a really great place to start that we tend to forget about is checking the menu of the restaurants that we like going to, because you have already tried the dish, you already know that that combination is something that you particularly enjoy. So even though in the menu you're not going to get all of the list of the ingredients, you can get a pretty good idea of the types of combinations that you're into. On that same note of dining out, can encourage you guys more than to try different types of cuisines, right? So even if you're someone who enjoys mainly, like, let's say pizza or pasta, try Greek food one day, or try Indian cuisine. Oh my gosh, Indian and Mexican. You want to start learning about spices and spice combinations and different types of flavors. For me, those two cuisines are like so amazing. The amount of love, the amount of work that goes into some dishes will really wow you, and you can definitely feel it, you can definitely taste it. It's very exciting to try authentic Indian, authentic Mexican, even Vietnamese. There's so much more to try, but just giving you some of the types of foods that I really enjoy. And I have attempted to replicate multiple times, especially Indian food, and that is just something that I have not managed to do so well yet. So you see, everybody is learning. Nobody knows everything, The important thing is to just go and show up every single day and to learn from, your successes and your mistakes. You're going to make mistakes in the kitchen. I've made tons of mistakes. I have made so many dishes that it's like, I don't love this at all. But it's a learning lesson. You figure out that those flavors, those combinations didn't work for you, or you even will learn to detect what happened and what you can do better. What are some things that you have been personally struggling with in the kitchen? Did they make it to the list? And if not, make sure to share in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time. If you haven't done so yet, make sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss another video.